Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her friends dreamed of marriage and children, she dreamed of serving her country. At 18, she shocked everyone by joining the army instead of going to college like her parents wanted. The military became her life. Sarah pushed herself harder than anyone expected. She completed ranger training, became an expert marksman, and earned respect from soldiers who initially doubted her abilities. Her dedication caught the attention of special operations recruiters. After 5 years of exemplary service, Sarah received an offer that would change everything. The CIA needed someone with her skills for a deep cover mission in Afghanistan. The assignment was dangerous: infiltrate a terrorist cell that had been planning attacks on American bases. Success could save hundreds of lives. Failure meant certain death. Sarah accepted without hesitation. She spent months preparing, learning the local language, studying the culture, and creating her cover identity. She would pose as a refugee seeking shelter, using her knowledge of Pashto and her ability to blend in with local customs. The mission began smoothly. Sarah successfully infiltrated the terrorist camp in the mountains near Kandahar. For weeks, she gathered crucial intelligence about planned attacks, weapon shipments, and key personnel. She transmitted coded messages to her handlers, providing information that led to several successful operations against terrorist networks. But intelligence work in enemy territory is never without risk. Someone within the organization grew suspicious of the new refugee, who asked too many questions. Sarah noticed the increased scrutiny but continued her mission, knowing that the information she was gathering could prevent a major attack on a nearby American base where over 200 soldiers were stationed. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered plans for a coordinated assault using suicide bombers and rocket attacks. The terrorists had inside information about base security protocols and planned to strike during a supply convoy arrival. Sarah knew she had to get this information out immediately, even if it meant blowing her cover. She sent an emergency transmission to her CIA handlers, detailing the attack plans and timing. The message was intercepted by terrorist communications specialists who had been monitoring radio frequencies for weeks. Within hours, Sarah's cover was completely blown. The terrorist leader, a ruthless man named Malik, who had lost 2 brothers in American drone strikes, was furious about the discovery of a spy in their midst. He ordered Sarah's immediate capture, planning to make an example of her that would discourage any future infiltration attempts. Sarah tried to escape, using her military training to evade capture for nearly 12 hours in the rugged mountain terrain. She moved at night, hid during the day, and tried to reach an extraction point her handlers had established for emergencies. But the terrorists knew the mountains better than anyone, and they had the advantage of numbers. Just as Sarah thought she might reach safety, she ran into an ambush. Surrounded by armed men with no way out, she was forced to surrender. The terrorists bound her hands and dragged her back to their camp, where Malik waited with plans for her execution. The terrorist leader had decided that a public hanging would send the strongest message to other potential spies. He wanted other Americans to know what happened to those who dared to infiltrate their operations. Sarah was thrown into a makeshift prison cell, where she spent 3 days knowing that each sunrise might be her last. During those dark hours, Sarah thought about her family back in Texas, her fellow soldiers, and the mission that had brought her to this moment. She had no regrets about serving her country, even knowing it might cost her life. The information she had transmitted had already prevented the terrorist attack, saving the lives of her fellow Americans at the base. On the morning of the planned execution, Sarah was dragged from her cell to a wooden platform the terrorists had constructed in the center of their camp. A crowd of fighters gathered to witness what their leader promised would be a lesson to all enemies of their cause. The morning air was crisp in the Afghan mountains as Sarah was forced onto the crude wooden platform. Her hands remained bound behind her back, and her military training kicked in as she scanned the crowd for any possible escape route. There were at least 40 armed men surrounding the platform, their faces showing a mixture of hatred and curiosity. Malik stepped forward, his voice carrying across the camp as he spoke in Pashto to his followers. He explained how this American spy had infiltrated their sacred brotherhood, violated their trust, and transmitted their secrets to the enemy. The crowd grew more agitated with each word, some shouting curses at Sarah while others demanded immediate justice. Sarah understood every word but showed no emotion on her face. She had been trained to maintain composure even in the face of death. Her CIA instructors had prepared her for this possibility, though she had hoped it would never come to this. She thought of her parents, who still believed she was stationed safely at a base in Germany, unaware of her real assignment. The rope was rough hemp, probably taken from supplies intended for other purposes. One of the terrorists threw it over a thick wooden beam that had been secured between two posts. The makeshift gallows creaked under the weight, but it would serve its grim purpose. Sarah watched as they prepared the noose, her mind racing through possibilities that all seemed to lead to the same inevitable conclusion. Malik approached Sarah directly, speaking to her in broken English mixed with Pashto. He wanted her to confess her crimes in front of his men, to admit that she had betrayed their hospitality and spied on their operations. He promised that a confession might earn her a quicker death, though they both knew he had no intention of showing mercy. Sarah looked him in the eye and spoke clearly in English. She told him that she was a soldier doing her duty, just as his men believed they were doing theirs. She would not apologize for protecting her fellow Americans or for preventing attacks on innocent people. Her words were translated for the crowd, which responded with angry shouts and demands for her immediate execution. The terrorist leader seemed almost impressed by her defiance, but it only strengthened his resolve to make her death a spectacle. He ordered his men to place the noose around Sarah's neck, adjusting it carefully to ensure maximum suffering. The rope was positioned to cause slow strangulation rather than a quick snap of the neck. As the noose tightened around her throat, Sarah closed her eyes and thought about her military oath. She had sworn to defend her country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and she had kept that promise even unto death. Her sacrifice would not be in vain if it meant her fellow soldiers remained safe from the terrorist plot she had exposed. Unknown to everyone in the camp, American forces had been tracking Sarah's location using satellite technology and intercepted communications. A joint task force of Army Rangers and Navy SEALs had been assembled for a rescue mission, but they were still hours away from reaching the remote mountain location. The rescue team was led by Colonel James Mitchell, a veteran SEAL with over 20 years of combat experience. Mitchell had read Sarah's file and understood the importance of her mission. He also knew that losing an American operative to public execution would be a devastating blow to intelligence operations. Throughout the region, Colonel Mitchell's team moved through the mountains with precision and speed, using their knowledge of terrain and advanced equipment to close the distance. They had studied satellite images of the terrorist camp and planned their approach to maximize surprise while minimizing casualties among any potential hostages. But time was running short. Radio intercepts indicated that the execution was planned for dawn, and the rescue team was still miles away from the target location. Mitchell pushed his men harder, knowing that every minute could mean the difference between life and death for the captured American operative. As Sarah stood on the platform with the rope around her neck, she had no knowledge of the rescue attempt. She focused on maintaining her dignity and courage in what she believed were her final moments. The terrorist leader raised his hand to signal the beginning of the execution, and his men prepared to kick away the wooden box beneath Sarah's feet. Colonel Mitchell and his team of 12 elite SEALs had been moving through the treacherous mountain terrain for over 6 hours. They carried full combat gear, advanced communications equipment, and enough firepower to level a small building. Each man was a veteran of multiple deployments, handpicked for their skills and reliability under extreme pressure. The intelligence reports indicated that Sarah had less than an hour before her scheduled execution. Mitchell studied the terrain maps one final time, identifying the best approach routes and escape corridors. The terrorist camp was positioned on a plateau surrounded by steep cliffs, making a direct assault extremely dangerous but offering few alternatives. Mitchell's plan was simple, but risky. Half his team would create a diversion on the eastern side of the camp, drawing the terrorists' attention and firepower away from the execution site. Meanwhile, Mitchell would lead the remaining 6 SEALs in a direct assault on the platform area, hoping to reach Sarah before the execution could be completed. The team moved into position just as the first rays of sunlight began illuminating the mountain peaks. Through his high-powered scope, Mitchell could see the crowd gathering around a wooden platform in the center of the camp. His heart sank as he spotted a figure in American military clothing, standing with a rope around her neck. Sarah Martinez stood straight and tall despite her circumstances, showing no sign of fear or submission to her captors. Mitchell had seen many brave soldiers during his career, but this young woman's composure in the face of certain death impressed even a veteran like himself. He was determined not to let her sacrifice be in vain. The diversion team moved into position on the eastern ridge, setting up explosive charges and preparing for their coordinated attack. Mitchell checked his watch and confirmed the timing with both teams through their encrypted radio system. They would have only one chance to execute this rescue successfully. At exactly 7:30 in the morning, the first explosions rocked the eastern side of the terrorist camp. The charges destroyed several supply tents and created massive clouds of smoke and debris. Confused shouts filled the air as fighters rushed toward the apparent attack, leaving fewer guards around the execution platform. Mitchell's assault team moved like shadows down the western slope, using the chaos and smoke as cover for their approach. They eliminated sentries silently with suppressed weapons, clearing a path toward the platform where Sarah waited with her executioners. The terrorist leader Malik was shouting orders to his men, trying to organize a defense against what he assumed was a major assault on their position. He ordered the execution to proceed immediately, not wanting to lose the opportunity to kill the American spy even if his camp was under attack. Sarah felt hands grabbing at the wooden box beneath her feet, preparing to kick it away and leave her hanging. She said a silent prayer and prepared for the end, hoping that her death would at least serve some purpose in the larger fight against terrorism. That's when the first sniper shots rang out from Mitchell's position. Two of the terrorists near the platform dropped instantly, their weapons clattering to the ground. The remaining fighters scrambled for cover, unsure where the shots were coming from or how many attackers they faced. Mitchell himself moved closer to the platform, his rifle trained on anyone who might harm Sarah. Through his scope, he could see the fear in the terrorists' eyes as they realized they were facing professional soldiers rather than a random attack by rival groups. The battle was fierce, but brief. Mitchell's team had the advantages of surprise, superior training, and better equipment. Within minutes, most of the terrorists around the platform were either dead or fleeing toward the mountains. Malik himself tried to escape but was cut down by precision rifle fire before he could reach cover. As the gunfire subsided, Mitchell sprinted toward the platform where Sarah still stood with the noose around her neck. She looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and hope, hardly daring to believe that rescue had actually come at the last possible moment. Mitchell climbed onto the platform and quickly assessed the situation. The rope was tight around Sarah's neck, and the wooden box beneath her feet was unstable from the struggle. One wrong move could still result in her death, even with her rescuers so close to success. Drawing his combat knife, Mitchell carefully positioned himself to cut the rope without causing Sarah to fall. He spoke to her in calm, reassuring tones, telling her to stay perfectly still while he worked to free her from the deadly noose that had brought her so close to death. Mitchell's hands were steady despite the intensity of the moment. The sharp combat knife gleamed in the morning sunlight as he positioned it carefully against the thick hemp rope. Sarah remained perfectly still, understanding that even the slightest movement could cause the unstable wooden box beneath her feet to shift and trigger the very death they were trying to prevent. The rope was thicker than Mitchell had expected, woven tightly and designed to support considerable weight. He had to saw through it carefully, applying just enough pressure to cut the fibers without jerking the noose around Sarah's neck. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool mountain air as he worked with surgical precision. Around them, the battle was winding down. Mitchell's team had neutralized most of the terrorist fighters, and the survivors were fleeing into the mountains rather than continuing to fight. Explosions from the diversion team's charges continued to echo across the valley, masking any sounds that might give away the rescue operation to other terrorist groups in the area. Sarah could feel the rope loosening slightly as Mitchell's blade cut through strand after strand of the hemp fibers. She focused on controlling her breathing and maintaining her balance on the precarious wooden box. Her military training had taught her to stay calm under pressure. But nothing could have prepared her for this exact situation. After what felt like hours but was actually only minutes, Mitchell felt the rope beginning to give way under his knife. He positioned his free hand to support Sarah's weight, ready to catch her if she fell when the rope finally separated completely. His team members had secured the immediate area and were keeping watch for any remaining threats. With a final slice of the blade, the rope snapped. Mitchell immediately grabbed Sarah around the waist, supporting her weight as she stumbled forward off the wooden box. The noose fell away from her neck, leaving angry red marks where it had pressed against her skin. For the first time in days, Sarah could breathe freely without the constant pressure of the rope. Mitchell quickly cut the bonds around Sarah's wrists, restoring circulation to her hands and arms. She flexed her fingers painfully, trying to work feeling back into them after hours of being tied. Her voice was hoarse from the rope's pressure when she finally spoke, thanking Mitchell and his team for the rescue she had never expected to come. The colonel helped Sarah down from the platform, supporting her as her legs threatened to give way after the ordeal. Adrenaline and relief were making her shaky, but her spirit remained unbroken. She immediately began providing Mitchell with intelligence about the terrorist camp's layout and any information that might be useful for securing the area. Mitchell was impressed by Sarah's professionalism even in the aftermath of her near execution. She put her duty above her personal trauma, focusing on helping the mission succeed rather than dwelling on what she had just survived. It was exactly the kind of dedication he expected from America's finest soldiers and intelligence operatives. The SEAL team worked quickly to search the camp for intelligence materials, weapons caches, and any indication of other planned terrorist activities. Sarah guided them to locations where she had observed important meetings and document storage. During her weeks of undercover work within the organization, they discovered detailed plans for multiple attacks against American and coalition forces throughout the region. Sarah's intelligence gathering had been even more valuable than anyone had realized, providing insights into terrorist networks that extended far beyond this single camp in the Afghan mountains. As the team prepared for extraction, Mitchell called for helicopter support to evacuate Sarah and transport the captured intelligence materials. The rescue had been successful, but they needed to leave the area quickly before other terrorist groups could respond to the sounds of battle echoing through the mountains. Sarah insisted on walking to the landing zone under her own power, refusing medical assistance despite her obvious exhaustion and the trauma she had endured. She had survived the mission and lived to fight another day, which was more than she had dared hope for when the noose was placed around her neck. The helicopter extraction went smoothly, with Sarah and the SEAL team safely aboard within an hour of the rescue. As they flew away from the mountain camp, Sarah looked down at the place where she had nearly died and felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at her survival, pride in her successful mission, and determination to continue serving her country despite the dangers. Mitchell sat beside Sarah during the flight, checking on her condition and debriefing her about the intelligence she had gathered. He was already thinking about how her information could be used to prevent future terrorist attacks and save American lives throughout the region. The helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Chapman, where medical personnel and intelligence officers were waiting to receive Sarah and her rescuers. Despite her protests that she was fine, Sarah was immediately taken to the base medical facility for a thorough examination and treatment of her injuries from the ordeal. The base doctor, Major Patricia Wong, found evidence of dehydration, malnutrition, and rope burns around Sarah's neck and wrists. While none of the injuries were life-threatening, they told the story of her difficult weeks under cover and the trauma of her captivity. Sarah submitted to the medical treatment, but insisted on being debriefed as soon as possible. Colonel Mitchell remained at the base to oversee the intelligence analysis and ensure that Sarah's information was processed quickly. The materials recovered from the terrorist camp were already yielding valuable insights into planned attacks throughout Afghanistan and neighboring countries. Sarah's mission had potentially saved hundreds of lives. Within hours of the rescue, Sarah was sitting in a secure briefing room with intelligence analysts from multiple agencies. Despite her exhaustion, she provided detailed information about the terrorist organization's structure, leadership, funding sources, and operational plans. Her memory for details impressed even experienced interrogators. The intelligence Sarah had gathered during her undercover mission painted a picture of a sophisticated terrorist network with connections to groups throughout Central Asia and the Middle East. The camp where she had been held was just one node in a larger organization that posed threats far beyond Afghanistan's borders. Sarah's information about planned attacks led to immediate action by coalition forces. Within 24 hours of her rescue, simultaneous raids were conducted against terrorist cells in 3 different countries. preventing attacks that could have killed dozens of innocent civilians and military personnel. The success of these operations vindicated the risks that Sarah had taken during her undercover mission. Her willingness to sacrifice her own safety had provided intelligence that no other source could have obtained. The terrorist leader Malik's organization was effectively destroyed, and several other related groups were severely damaged. Colonel Mitchell visited Sarah in the medical facility after her debriefing sessions were complete. He found her sitting by a window, looking out at the mountains where she had nearly died just days before. Despite everything she had been through, she seemed remarkably composed and focused on the future rather than dwelling on past trauma. Mitchell told Sarah that her mission had been an extraordinary success, even though it had nearly cost her life. The intelligence she had provided was already being used to prevent terrorist attacks and save American lives. Her sacrifice and courage had made a real difference in the war against terrorism. Sarah appreciated Mitchell's words, but she was already thinking about her next assignment. She had proven herself capable of operating under extreme pressure and surviving situations that would break most people. Her experience made her even more valuable as an intelligence operative. However, Sarah's superiors had other plans for her immediate future. The CIA and Army both recognized that she needed time to recover from her ordeal, both physically and psychologically. Despite her protests, she was ordered to return to the United States for extended debriefing and medical evaluation. The flight home gave Sarah time to process what had happened to her in the Afghan mountains. She thought about the moment when the rope had been around her neck and death seemed certain. She also thought about Colonel Mitchell's calm professionalism as he cut through that rope and saved her life. Sarah realized that her rescue had created a bond between her and Mitchell's team that went beyond normal military relationships. They had risked their own lives to save hers, and she would never forget that debt. She also understood that her survival meant she could continue serving her country in ways that few others could. Upon landing at Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, Sarah was met by CIA officials who escorted her to a secure facility for extensive debriefing sessions. The intelligence community wanted to extract every possible detail from her experience, ensuring that future operatives could benefit from her hard-earned knowledge. The debriefing process took weeks, with Sarah meeting with analysts, psychologists, and operations specialists who helped her document every aspect of her mission. Her insights into terrorist recruitment, training, and operational procedures filled gaps in American intelligence that had existed for years. Throughout this process, Sarah maintained contact with Colonel Mitchell and several members of his SEAL team. The bonds forged during her rescue had created lasting friendships that transcended normal military protocols. Mitchell became something of a mentor to Sarah, helping her process the trauma of her experience. 6 months after her rescue, Sarah found herself in a comfortable office at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The transition from the harsh mountains of Afghanistan to the bureaucratic environment of American intelligence had been jarring, but she was adapting to her new role as a senior analyst and trainer for undercover operations. Sarah's experience had made her invaluable to the CIA's training programs. New operatives preparing for deep cover missions sought her guidance on survival techniques, maintaining cover identities, and dealing with the psychological pressures of extended undercover work. Her near-death experience had given her insights that could not be taught from textbooks. The psychological evaluation that Sarah had undergone after her return showed remarkable resilience. Despite the trauma of her captivity and near execution, she displayed no signs of post-traumatic stress disorder or other conditions that might have been expected after such an ordeal. Her military training and personal strength had carried her through the darkest moments. Colonel Mitchell had also been reassigned to a position at the Pentagon, where he was working on improving coordination between military special operations and intelligence agencies. The success of Sarah's rescue had highlighted the importance of rapid response capabilities for protecting American operatives in hostile territory. Mitchell and Sarah met regularly for coffee at a small cafe near the Pentagon, maintaining the friendship that had begun with her dramatic rescue. These conversations helped both of them process their shared experience and plan for future operations that might require similar cooperation between different branches of American security services. The intelligence that Sarah had gathered during her undercover mission continued to yield results months after her rescue. Terrorist networks throughout Central Asia had been disrupted by operations based on her information, and several major attacks had been prevented. Her sacrifice had created a ripple effect that saved lives around the world. Sarah's parents in Texas had finally learned the truth about their daughter's military service when she was awarded the Intelligence Star for exceptional courage in intelligence operations. The ceremony at CIA headquarters was small and classified, but it formally recognized her contribution to national security and her extraordinary survival under impossible circumstances. The medal meant less to Sarah than the knowledge that her mission had been successful. She had infiltrated a dangerous terrorist organization, gathered crucial intelligence, and lived to see that information used to protect innocent lives. The rope around her neck had been just one obstacle in a mission that ultimately achieved its objectives. Sarah's new position allowed her to influence the training of future intelligence operatives, ensuring that they would be better prepared for the challenges she had faced. She developed new protocols for emergency extractions, improved communication procedures for deep cover operatives, and created survival training programs based on her real-world experience. Colonel Mitchell's work at the Pentagon focused on reducing the response time for rescue operations when American operatives were in danger. The 6 hours it had taken his team to reach Sarah's location was too long, and he was determined to improve the military's ability to respond to similar crises in the future. Together, Sarah and Mitchell worked on joint training exercises that brought together CIA operatives and military special forces. These exercises simulated the conditions they had faced in Afghanistan, helping both groups understand how to work together more effectively in real crisis situations. The terrorist organization that had captured Sarah was completely dismantled within a year of her rescue. Follow-up operations based on her intelligence led to the capture or elimination of every significant leader in the network. The camp where she had nearly been executed was abandoned and later destroyed by coalition forces. Sarah occasionally received updates about the impact of her mission from her former CIA handlers. Each prevented attack and disrupted terrorist cell validated the risk she had taken and the price she had nearly paid. Her willingness to sacrifice her life for her country had ultimately saved many other lives. The rope that had nearly killed Sarah was recovered from the terrorist camp and eventually made its way to the CIA's Museum of Intelligence Artifacts. It served as a reminder of the dangers that American operatives faced in the field and the courage required to serve in the most dangerous assignments. Sarah never forgot the feeling of that rope around her neck or the sound of Mitchell's knife cutting through the hemp fibers that bound her to almost certain death. These memories served as constant reminders of how precious life was and how important it was to use her survival for purposes that would honor the sacrifice she had been willing to make. As she trained new operatives and shared her hard-earned wisdom, Sarah knew that her experience would continue to protect American lives long after her own service ended. The lessons learned from her near execution would help future generations of intelligence professionals survive their own dangerous missions. 5 years had passed since Colonel Mitchell's knife had severed the rope that bound Sarah to death on that mountain platform in Afghanistan. Sarah Martinez, now Deputy Director of Covert Operations Training at CIA headquarters, stood before a classroom of 20 new recruits who hung on every word of her survival story. The young operatives represented the best and brightest that America had to offer. They came from military backgrounds, prestigious universities, and various government agencies, all united by their willingness to serve their country in the most dangerous corners of the world. Sarah saw herself in their eager faces and determined expressions. Sarah had transformed her near-death experience into a comprehensive training program that had revolutionized how the CIA prepared operatives for deep cover missions. Her survival techniques, psychological preparation methods, and emergency protocols had been adopted throughout the intelligence community and had already saved several lives in the field. Colonel Mitchell, now General Mitchell and commander of Joint Special Operations Command, remained Sarah's closest friend and professional colleague. Their shared experience had created an unbreakable bond that transcended rank, agency boundaries, and the normal protocols of government service. They spoke almost daily about ongoing operations and strategic planning. The training facility where Sarah worked had been named the Martinez Center for Operational Survival, honoring her contributions to intelligence training and her extraordinary survival against impossible odds. The center trained not only CIA operatives but also special forces, personnel from all branches of the military and intelligence officers from allied nations. Sarah's story had become legendary within the intelligence community, though it remained classified and unknown to the general public. New recruits arrived at training already having heard whispered versions of her experience, though they rarely understood the full scope of what she had endured until they heard it directly from her. In her office, Sarah kept a framed photograph of the hemp rope that had nearly killed her, along with Mitchell's combat knife that had cut her free. These artifacts served as daily reminders of how quickly situations could change in the field and how important it was to prepare operatives for every possible scenario. The intelligence network that Sarah had helped dismantle through her undercover mission had never recovered from the damage inflicted by her information. The terrorist organization's collapse had created a power vacuum that was filled by less organized and less dangerous groups, significantly reducing the threat level throughout Central Asia. Sarah had declined multiple offers to return to field operations, choosing instead to focus on training the next generation of intelligence operatives. She believed that her greatest contribution to national security would come through preparing others to survive the challenges she had faced, rather than risking her own life again in hostile territory. General Mitchell's rescue procedures had been adopted as standard protocol for all special operations forces. The techniques his team had used to locate and extract Sarah were now taught at military schools around the world, and similar operations had successfully rescued dozens of American personnel from dangerous situations. Sarah's parents had finally made peace with their daughter's career choice. After learning about her heroic service and narrow escape from execution, they understood that she was making a difference in ways that few people could, and they supported her decision to continue serving her country in the intelligence field. The rope burns around Sarah's neck had faded to barely visible scars, but the psychological impact of her experience remained strong. She used these memories to help other operatives understand the mental preparation required for survival in extreme situations and the importance of never giving up hope even when death seemed certain. Every year on the anniversary of her rescue, Sarah and General Mitchell met at Arlington National Cemetery to honor the memory of all intelligence operatives and special forces personnel who had made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. They understood how easily Sarah could have joined their ranks if not for Mitchell's quick thinking and surgical precision with his knife. Sarah had never married or started a family, choosing instead to dedicate her life completely to protecting her country and training those who would carry on the mission after her. She found fulfillment in knowing that her experience and knowledge were being passed on to new generations of American heroes. The final lesson that Sarah always shared with her trainees was the importance of teamwork and trust. Her survival had depended not only on her own skills and determination, but also on the courage and professionalism of Mitchell's rescue team. No operative succeeded alone, and no mission was more important than bringing everyone home safely. As Sarah concluded another training session and watched her students file out of the classroom, she touched the faint scars on her neck and remembered the sound of hemp fibers snapping under the pressure of Mitchell's blade. That moment had given her a second chance at life, and she was determined to use every day of that gift in service to her country and the protection of those who served alongside her.